As Israel continues to fight on its self-described six-front war, waiting to find out when Israel is going to start its seventh one against Iran in retaliation for the 180 missiles that hit last week, one has to wonder when they're looking at what the U.S. is doing, what the U.S. is saying, what Israel is saying, what their next plans are, to ask, are we our own worst enemies? Are we setting ourselves up for potential disaster and, in a worst case scenario, even a military defeat? Now, that may sound crazy to even ask because the power disparity between Israel and all of its opponents is really off the charts. But when you start adding all this stuff up and looking at the events happening off the battlefield, it becomes a very valid question. And I've got actually a combat veteran right now to try to help me undo some of this stuff. And that is Larry Johnson, former CIA analyst, leader at the sonar21.com. But if you wonder why he's dressed up like this, he's in Florida right now, just basically in the eye of the hurricane, or the front side of the hurricane that's about to hit. We hope that he stays on air the whole time during this episode. So have you got the hatches battened down?
We do that. Thank God we got hurricane windows and hurricane doors. So if the big bad wolf comes, it can huff and puff, but will not blow the house down.
Well, let's hope that continues to be the case. Let's hope that wolf isn't too strong. And in fact, that's kind of one of the issues we have to look at Israel. As I said in the opening here, if you look at Israel and its power disparity between any of its opponents, whether that's the Houthis, whether that's the Hamas in the Gaza Strip, I don't even know what Israel calls its enemies in the West Bank, although they cite that as one of the tire servers. Israel is off the charts stronger than them. But to what extent do the numbers start to add up to where it's like, this is a problem?
Well, when your strength is your brute force. So Israel's never been known for doing anything in a deft, precise manner. I mean, yes, the pagers went off. Again, that was a brute force. They filled all these different pagers with explosives and they go off. It's one thing if they were squaring off and killing Hamas fighters, Hezbollah fighters, guys who are wearing uniforms, or even guys who are kitted out and openly carrying weapons. Okay, you drop a bomb on them, but that's not what they're doing. They're really indiscriminately bombing, and other reports indicate they've been using artificial intelligence, AI. Alistair Crook describes it as the lavender. And it just selects targets where it thinks, the software thinks Hamas operatives might be in the Gaza Strip, for example, and then they drop bombs and big bombs. And, the number of women and children that are being killed is staggering. And we've not, I just saw a number on Al Jazeera that they said that in World War II, if you look at the United States, the tons of explosives represented by the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, as well as then the bombing of Dresden and the firebombing of Tokyo. When you put all of those bombings together, the total amount of explosives that have been dropped on the Gaza Strip, twice that. Two times the amount that was dropped in World War II. Think about that. They've done basically 3 times the nuclear explosions in Nagasaki and Hiroshima. And that's just on this confined population in this area. So that's where Israel's strength becomes its weakness, because instead of attracting support and having other countries line up and say, hey, Israel, we're with you, they're coming out in opposition, supporting the charges of genocide against Israel. And, it still has good, decent, intact relations, I'll say it that way, with Egypt and Jordan, but God knows how long that's going to last. Any progress that was being made with Saudi Arabia on opening diplomatic relations and normalizing things, that's dead. And in fact, the Saudis went out of their ways to embrace the Iranians, who are, they've been at odds for years. So, this military force of the Israelis, it's more like a blunt object. It's not a sniper rifle.
Yeah, and I want to actually look at the at the nature of the I guess the objectives that Israel has set for it. And I want to talk a little bit about the military effectiveness of these targets based on the objectives that they have set and using the military power. And
Right.
first one, I want to look at most of these areas that they're saying are their objectives. And then I'm going to hold off on the Iranian one separately because that's like its own category. But let's start off looking first of all at the Houthi issue that Israel just attacked not long ago. And you know, they've been doing this for a long time. Of course, we're doing it in the Red Sea. We've been doing that for a long time. Saudi Arabia has been doing it since like 2014, 2015. Nobody has been able to quell the Houthis. So what has Israel bitten off here just on that one front?
Made themselves a more active target of the Houthis. You know, before it looks like the Houthis were content just to shut down traffic and keep oil from flowing into Israel through the Red Sea. Not any longer. They're firing missiles into Haifa, into Tel Aviv. And this really creates the scenario, not to jump ahead, but it's one thing if Israel's having to just worry about missile threats from the Houthis out of Yemen. But then they've got missile and rocket threats coming out of Hezbollah in the north. And then if that's combined and if Iran coordinates any of that with Hezbollah and the Houthis, you've got the recipe for overwhelming Israel's air defense system, because they have a finite supply. They don't have an infinite supply. And the way these air defense systems usually work is they fire off 2 missiles for every incoming, every one that's inbound. So if, let's say Iran has 3,000 missiles, well, that means Israel's going to have minimum 6,000 to fire back. And it's really unlikely that they have that many, given everything that's been fired over the years and the slow production of those. So the Houthis, by being able to move their missiles around, move the rockets around, move the drones around, become very difficult targets to hit, and they're able to retaliate. So that, you know, there's one, Israel can't ignore them.
Right. So, but with them being out there, and they're not by themselves a huge, more like a thorn in your side kind of situation,
Right.
but it's going to continue on. And there's no military attainable objective. There's no way that you're going to, quote, defeat the Houthis with what Israel's doing, because Israel itself is more a thorn in the side of the Yemen because of the infrequency of what they're doing, because they're focused elsewhere. Then we look back, let's go even to the Gaza Strip. That's kind of the forgotten front right now,
Right.
at least by the West, but it's not really forgotten on the ground because that's still an active fight. Actually, the Wall Street Journal, I think, is reporting that the IDF is moving back into northern the Gaza Strip and starting a new offensive, because the last one keeps the last time they went through it, the Hezbollah, the Hamas guys keep coming back up, and they have, quote, fought several times over the past year. And now an infantry division has begun an operation in the area this past Sunday, when at a time when they now have a report I saw just about an hour ago says that there are 4 combat divisions in Lebanon fighting Hezbollah. Now that you've got a full division down here still fighting. So you're now spreading yourself even thinner. And just tell me what sense this makes, that after a full year of combat now, you still can't militarily defeat the foe in the Gaza Strip, which is hermetically sealed, as the same time you've now opened up one in Lebanon. Are either of those militarily attainable?
No, and that's the problem. You say Gaza would be attainable if the Israelis were going to commit enough troops and be willing to risk high casualties on their part in order to actually go in there and seize every inch of that territory. But that's a battle they don't want to do, nor are they actually physically numbered. They don't have the physical numbers to do it. And so in the midst of this, instead of either trying to figure out how to exit gracefully out of Gaza or to fully commit and bring an end to it, they've now opened a second front in southern Lebanon against Hezbollah. And when you compare the armaments of Hezbollah to those of Hamas, Hamas is the kid with a slingshot. Hamas is the folks with full automatic weapons, rockets, drones, mortars, and ballistic missiles. So Israel, they're jumping up a level of competition. And the other thing that's taking place behind them in Gaza is Hamas continues to grow and expand. It's reportedly actually able to recruit more people to fight with it. So I don't know of how this could be considered a viable strategy to open up now at least a 3-front, possibly 4-front war for Israel, because that means your general staff, they've now got a plan in 2 different theaters, essentially, or 3. And none of these armies have infinite planning resources. So, I mean, if you're responsible for planning the operations, where are you going to get the personnel? And this increases the chance that they're going to be sloppy, because you know as well as I do, the staffs, those joint staffs, the people that they're actually sitting there having to do, develop the plans for the J3 for the operations folks. They work 24/7. They don't have a cadre of reserves they can call in, and so when they're having to plan, and when in this kind of planning figures, what units do we need, what kind of support units are going to be required, what are the logistics that are going to be required, how are we going to get those logistics in place, who's responsible for that, what are the communications, what's the medical evacuation. I mean, it goes on and on and on. You know what, you've done that planning yourself. People, yeah. The average citizen doesn't appreciate how detailed and in-depth these are. Well, if the Israel's either doing one of 2 things, either they're conducting some plans for these operations into Gaza and southern Lebanon, or they're not, which if they're not, maybe that explains why they had so much trouble in Gaza.
And just from a military perspective, one of the things that I find so egregious and painful to look at is what is even the stated objective? Because when I was in the military, whether that was in Desert Storm, where we were fighting against the Iraqi Tawakkalna division, or some of these even counterinsurgency operations in Iraq and in Afghanistan after that, at least on the tactical level, they had an attainable mission. They're like, all right, we're going to conduct in Afghanistan. We're going to conduct this operation. We're going to take this Taliban stronghold. We're going to push them back right here in the Arghandab Valley, etc. Or in Desert Storm, all right, we're going to move to contact and destroy the 1st Brigade of the Tawakkalna Division, set the conditions for passing the 1st Armored Division through, that kind of thing. Those are tasks we know. They're really hard, but if you have or haven't accomplished them. But here, all we have, let's look at them first of all. There's no stated objective in the Houthis that I see other than just throwing some missiles at them. So there's not even something to accomplish or not. In Hamas, it's only destroy Hamas, but it's not defined how that is. And as you see now, then they're just starting back at the top and mowing the grass, as some people have said in that. And now that with the Hezbollah, there's sort of this comment that they're going to, I think it's called the Alawi River, which is pushing up north. It's like 37 miles away, north of the Litani River. It's no longer just the Litani. And I'm just thinking, what is the objective? Because they have told people to get out, and they have said that their objective is to allow the people to move, the Israeli people, back to their border areas here. But there's no comment about, all right, well, when we get to this level, then they can do that, and then the war will be over. They're just conducting combat operations, and then you'll never know when you're finished, and you never will be finished.
Right. Well, part of and I want to make sure we distinguish between the Zionist mentality and the Jewish mentality. This what we're talking about is this Zionist attitude, and I've run across this with here in America with some very they're prominent, wealthy, educated, successful Americans, but they say the dumbest stuff, like they think it's just a matter, all Israel has to do is show up and they're going to win. That no matter what Israel does, that's the enemy's going to crumble and fly away. That they can attack Iran and Iran will be devastated. And you try to explain to them, say, look, this is a lot more complicated than that. Hezbollah, for example, in southern Lebanon, They're well entrenched, dug into underground cities is probably the best way to describe it. There, you can literally drive trucks and cars to the passageways. So we're not talking some tiny crawl space, and they've had years to prepare this because they know exactly what they've been up against, exactly what Israel's playbook is. That Israel's going to come in and bomb indiscriminately above ground, so that the Hezbollah folks go below ground. Now, pity the poor civilians that are above ground.
Yeah.
And, they're the ones paying the price, but Hezbollah, that's not going to affect Hezbollah. And so then Israel will start advancing and they'll get ambushed. And once they start taking casualties, then the political pressure starts going up because Israel is so small relative, it's about the
Right,
size
relative
of
to anything.
Manhattan.
Yeah, they're just not that big, right?
Yeah, 6 million,
Fight a
7 million people.
region-wide war like they are selecting and choosing to do here. So that's basically the multi-front thing. I mean, we could also talk about the West Bank, and Israel's Netanyahu specifically mentioned that as one of his fronts that he's fighting on, though it's unclear who the enemy is in there because they're having all these combat operations, but he's never said, it's not like Hamas isn't there, so I don't know who he's actually fighting, but there's a lot going on in that area as well. But the biggest one that we're, of course, waiting for the other shoe to drop is whether Israel is going to go into Iran. They keep saying over and over that they're going to. They have said it's going to be painful, it's going to be big, and all this is for sure coming in here. But I want to look at a couple of things here because the title of this episode is, are we in the West setting the stage for Israel's loss and possibly by extension ours? I want to start to show why that is on the table here, because most people are thinking that, like you just said, well, of course Israel win because they're the stronger one. And we're going to start to paint a picture here that we're more trouble than it appears. First of all, I want to look at Gary, if you could bring up that map of the air defense systems in Iran. So you see that Iran has quite a bit of, they have a lot of these significant targets with their oil infrastructure, especially their nuclear sites, which you see mentioned there. A lot of those circles in the upper left and upper right corner are some of their missile forces. So they have them spread out throughout the country, and they have them defended by a number of different kinds of systems. I wonder if you could talk just generally about, I think, the S-300 system, which they got from Russia. How effective is that at defending? And the bigger question is, how hard would this be for the Israeli Air Force to actually destroy all these targets?
Oh, it's impossible for the Israeli Air Force to destroy all those targets. They just don't appreciate how big Iraq is. Iran is 4 times the size of Iraq. And you remember from your own experience, just flying around that place it seemed big. The S-300 is something the Russians developed back in the 1960s, but have continued to improve it over the years. But it's an effective air defense system. It's being, I wouldn't call it replaced, supplemented, and in some instances replaced by the S-400. The biggest difference in the S-400 is the S-400 can multitask. So it can fire multiple different kinds of, up to 5 or 6 different kinds of missiles. Some can be directed at ballistic missiles. Some can be directed at cruise missiles. And it can engage, I think the last I read was like 72 different targets, one unit. So it's more sophisticated that way. But the S-300 is comparable in performance. In fact, what they call the S-400 now, that's really the S-300, and then they attached 3 or 4 additional letters to the end of it. What I think is causing Israel a delay in attacking targets in Iran is that the Russians have supplied the Iranians with more advanced air defense systems. And you got two. It's not just a matter of bringing in S-400 systems, because a lot of these targets in Iran, they're fixed targets. They're not mobile. So the missiles may move around, but the oil refineries, the nuclear facilities don't. But those facilities have been hardened, and they've been they had other air defense systems. So you're not looking at just one kind of system. You're looking at a layered, multi-layered system. And what Iran has made clear is that if Israel attacks it, say let's say Israel attacks one of its oil drilling sites, oil processing, the refineries, then Iran says they're going to hit back. And I think that they will be proportional tit for tat. And by that I mean, if Israel hits an oil refinery in Iran, Iran will hit an oil refinery in Israel. Well, guess what? Iran's a whole lot bigger, has a lot more oil refineries, and can sustain more hits that way than Israel can. And so Israel could find itself in a situation where in this next go round, if they do strike Iran, I do not think Iran's going to wait a day or two. They may fire back the same day. They're not going to wait. They've already pre-targeted and sighted things in. They've warned the Israelis in the West as much as possible. You attack us, we can penetrate your air defense.
Yeah, and in fact, on that point, that's the other thing that is, I think, is a real big misunderstanding in the West, that the Iron Dome, which means all of the air defense, whether it's the David Sling or the I can't remember that third one right offhand, the Arrow system, that it's basically flawless, 90% effectiveness, etc. Well, we had Professor Ted Postel from MIT come on to show, not so much. Watch this. What do you think accounts for the paucity of the number of interceptor missiles?
Well, I think that the Israelis know that the interceptors have a near zero chance of actually hitting anything. And because the intercept probability is so low, you don't want to fire 20 or 30 or 40 interceptors on the chance you'll hit something, because it makes no difference when you have all these warheads coming in terms of the outcome. So why would you expend all these interceptors when they could be used? In fact, you will need them when the drones and the cruise missiles are used to attack Israel, which is another phase of this combat.
And I wonder if you could kind of tag off on his comment there about how Iran may choose to use a combination of drones and missiles.
Yeah, so if your strategy is ultimately to defeat Israel's air defense system, the primary way to do it, instead of blowing it up, is bleed it, force it to use up all of its missiles firing. Israel does not have an infinite capability to replace those missiles that it's firing. So and for, like, say, an inbound cruise missile, normally you would fire out of the Iron Dome, for example, 2 missiles from that to try to intercept that one cruise missile. Well, if Iran decides to fire 200 cruise missiles, which they're capable of doing, that's 400 Iron Dome missiles. And they're comparable to the Patriot. We know for a fact that Lockheed Martin in 1 year can only produce 550 missiles. So just do the math. And just one of these attacks, potentially, you could exhaust Israel's supply of air defense systems. Then they are completely vulnerable. Then it does change their calculation about who they can attack, what they can attack, and how they should attack. And so, that may be another factor weighing in on them delaying this vowed promised retaliation against Iran, because I think a sane military planner is going to look at that and say, you know what, we're biting off something we're not prepared to chew on. This could be bigger.
Well,
this could destroy us.
That may be what some of the sane voices are saying, but I'm going to show you a list of those that are not quite in that category, and they are loud and they are boisterous and they are public. And that is the problem, because all these issues we just talked about, the military difficulties on the ground, the military difficulties of attacking into Iran and of defending a retaliation against Iran, are all big yellow red flags, sirens and everything else saying, don't go down this path because you can't succeed. You can't win it. Figure something else out. Diplomacy, whatever else you want to use. But instead, we're going to start off with this is Richard Goldberg, who's the former National Security Advisor official, National Security Council official, and I think the head of the Foundation of Defensive Democracies. He was speaking in Washington, D.C. at an event marking the 1-year anniversary of the 10/7 terrorist attack. Watch what he says about what Israel should do.
There are reports at this hour the White House is offering Israel a compensation package to hold back against Iran. Sounds more like extortion than compensation. Israel doesn't need burial insurance. It needs America to stand by its side right now. Israel is fighting its second war of independence. Every battle is a battle for survival. Every decision is existential. And Israel has only one option: victory. And let's be clear, Israel's victory is America's victory. So thank you for coming out here.
Israel's victory is it though? Is Israel's victory American a victory?
No, it is. It's really helping end U.S. influence in West Asia. As the Levant, that entire area should probably be designated. This is we're witnessing a time that hasn't happened in your or my lifetime of the United States becoming isolated in the world, where our support for Israel, when Israel is actually, if you will, creating the conditions for its own demise. In the aftermath of October 7th, they had a choice. There was actually a diplomatic options open to them. Well, it always feels good to go out and kill people. The reality is they would have had support from Egypt, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, that would have actually, and Turkey, that they could have put effective economic pressure on Hamas, got the hostages back, and worked out a ceasefire deal that would have protected the Palestinians. But they didn't want to do that. That's not their goal. Their goal is to eliminate the Palestinians in Gaza, because the Gazans were actually 2 years ago getting ready to sign a deal with an energy company because they've got one of the largest gas supplies offshore of Gaza. That's what Israel wants. This is about oil and gas. And so in all of this, the United States is seen as just blatantly hypocritical in enabling Israel's ability to kill women and children primarily, and yet at the same time funneling weapons into Ukraine that are being used to kill women and children in Russia. So, it's not, the United States is losing its place in the world as a leader.
And when you see cheerleaders like this, a lot of people, because they don't see shows like what we're doing here or some of the things you're writing on sonar21.com. And all they hear is this stuff on major news media. And you hear him said, every fight is existential. And this is fighting for our lives, our second war of independence. And people thought, wow, I didn't realize it was that serious. So yeah, sure, go ahead. Now, that we're going to add on to, because one of the things about, we saw on those maps a second ago, is some of the proposed targets in Iran are nuclear sites. And so one of the, I think he was the Canadian member of parliament, the leader of the opposition, the Canadian opposition, was asked whether he thought that Israel should go ahead or not. Watch what he said.
I think the idea of allowing a genocidal, theocratic, unstable dictatorship that is desperate to avoid being overthrown by its own people to develop nuclear weapons is about the most dangerous and irresponsible thing that the world could ever allow. And if Israel were to stop that genocidal, theocratic, unstable government from acquiring nuclear weapons, it would be a gift by the Jewish state to humanity.
Wow.
Yeah.
A gift to humanity for Israel to go in there and take care of our problem and destroy the nuclear sites. First of all, let's just look at it. You touched on this a second ago. Is it even possible to destroy the nuclear sites in Iran?
With multiple nuclear weapons, maybe. but I mean, I'm talking multiple. I participated directly in scripting exercises that looked at attacking suspected nuclear facilities that are buried underground, what they call hardened, deeply buried targets. Very, very difficult, if not impossible, mission. But see, all of this is predicated upon what he said. Poliver, I think is his name, is predicated on a lie. They keep portraying Iran as this genocidal society. How many wars has Iran actually been fighting over the last 25 years? Not really since the end of the Iran-Iraq War, where we were a major contributor to the Iraqis in attacking Iran. Iran has not been sending out armies overseas. What they have been doing is working with Hamas, working with Hezbollah, trying to help them liberate what they see as the Palestinian territory from the Israelis. Yeah, so they've been openly doing that, but it's been within limits. They've not been launching suicide bombers every 5 minutes. In fact, the level of actual terrorist attacks against Israelis, as I've mentioned before on your show, according to data from the Israeli Foreign Ministry, has been very, very low over the last 24 years. They've really been trying to work more of the political process, and that's been rebuffed at every turn because Israel has no intention of relinquishing that land. That's why they've got 700,000 settlers illegally occupying the West Bank, refusing to get out and attacking Palestinians who've lived there for generations.
And it's interesting that there's some of the description used by that member of parliament. I had to go, wait, which side is he talking about again? Because this genocidal thing, well, that's starting to pick up a little bit of annoyance in the West, actually. And you may have seen this already, but there was a big exchange at the State Department yesterday with Matt Miller and a reporter from the Gray Zone. If you haven't seen it, watch this.
We often hear in response to these concerns that, well, Putin, Khomeini, they're war criminals, they're terrorists, as if they're too inherently evil or immoral for us to negotiate with. But meanwhile, this administration has financed a genocide in Gaza for the last year, and every day you're up there denying accountability for it. So, I mean, what gives you the right to lecture other countries on their moral?
So if you have a policy question for me, I'm happy to take it. If you want to give a speech, there are plenty of places in Washington where you can give a speech.
Yeah, but people are sick of the bullshit in here. I mean, it is a genocide. You are abetting it, and you are risking nuclear war in Ukraine for this proxy war.
Plenty of other places to give a speech. Go ahead.
Thank you.
Yikes. I mean, when that erupts even inside the State Department briefing, which is ordinarily a little bit calmer, what does that tell you?
Well, the Gray Zone through Max Blumenthal just put out on Monday, I believe, a new video. It's called Atrocity Inc. And it goes through chapter verse details the lies, the incredible lies that Israel has told over the past year to justify its slaughter of Palestinian civilians. So, for example, at the outset, they continue to claim that Hamas beheaded babies, killed babies, burned them alive, baked them in an oven. It's all a lie. In fact, in that entire attack on October 7th, there was one baby who was killed, and that was through a bullet that was shot through a door. So you had a pass through. And that was unintended. It was accidental, but nonetheless, it resulted in the death of that child. I posted on Sonar 21 last night an article of, I put up 6 videos, recent videos of Palestinian children who are missing limbs, who are dead, who are burned almost beyond recognition. That's been done by the Israelis. And when you and the videos come with a strong warning, watch at your own risk. So the one who's actually killing children have been the Israelis.
Well, and listen, this, a lot of people say, oh, well, Gray Zone and some of these other guys, they're just, they have it out for Israel, blah, blah, blah. Well, how about the New York Times? Because this is out today, to where there was a piece published in the New York Times where there was a doctor who had gone into the Gaza Strip to help out. A person who was avowedly non-religious. They just went on a humanitarian, and they spent, I think it was 13 days in April and May, or March and April. I'm sorry, March and April of this year. And they said that they had discovered, in fact, you can see that written there, it said, but one of the many things that stood out working in the hospital in Gaza, one got to me. Nearly every day I was there, I saw a new young child who had been shot in the head or the chest, virtually all of whom went on to die, 13 in total. And this person goes on to say in this article was that after I got back, I started comparing notes to other people who went there. And so they said, we ended up talking to 65 doctors and nurses and paramedics who also went into Gaza. We're talking Westerners now, and had gone there. And as you see on the screen there, it said 44 of those doctors, nurses, and paramedics saw multiple cases of preteen children who had been shot in the head or the chest, meaning this is a systematic situation here.
Exactly.
This is no longer uncorroborated. This is not just enemies of Israel saying that. This is just validated news sources on top of all the ones you're talking about. And it's time to start recognizing, hey, there's something going on here that is definitely not in America's interest and violates what we claim anyway are our values.
Well, exactly right. And frankly, these are not Jewish values. These are not the values of Judaism. That's why I say you've got to distinguish between Judaism and these Zionist zealots. Because Max Blumenthal, who made the video about Atrocity Inc., he's Jewish. Aaron Mate, his partner at the Gray Zone, he's Jewish. So you've had other prominent Jews speaking out as well. Jeffrey Sachs. In opposition to this. So that's why I think it's important to recognize that there is in Judaism values that are upheld, but that's not what's being exercised by these crazed Zionists. They believe that they're embarked upon a holy mission and are entitled to exterminate whoever gets in their way. And, you know, when Israel first came out with the claim that Hamas had beheaded or killed 40 babies, but, you know, I knew immediately it was a lie for one reason. They didn't publish the names. You didn't have a single grieving grandparent standing in the streets of Israel crying over a dead grandchild. And listen, there's nothing more powerful out there than grandparents. So right away, you knew that they had fabricated this lie in order to justify killing civilians, where they're actually killing children. Babies. I mean, the number of images I've seen are just they're horrific and haunting, with kids missing chunks of their head, and it's just it's being done because the Israeli pilots are sitting up at 5,000 feet or lower, and they're able to bomb indiscriminately. They don't have to see the blood. They don't have to see the suffering. They're just pressing a button, playing a video game.
And those things ought to temper what we're doing here, but a lot of those lies just continue to be repeated as though they're established fact by many in the West. And we've been, you talk about politicians and people who maybe not know any better and say want to keep this war going, but when it's a former retired general, 4-star general, supreme allied commander of all NATO forces, he should know better than what is or is not possible militarily. And yet here's what Wes Clark is saying Israel should do. Watch this.
Do you believe Bibi Netanyahu will pull the trigger on Iran?
I certainly do, and I believe he should. All the tragedy in Hamas, all that's going on with Hezbollah is traceable to the source, and that's Iran. And so this is the moment, and this is the situation in which Israel has to strike, and strike hard at Iran.
I just cannot get past this, and I just want to reiterate it here. What, General Clark, is the attainable military objective? Military is supposed to be used by the classic Clausewitzian, politics by other means, et cetera. So you're trying to attain some sort of political outcome or diplomatic outcome, and you're using, if not diplomacy, then you're using military force to get it. If we did what Wes Clark says there, what is the attainable military objective and the benefit for Israel to attack nuclear sites in Iran?
Well, they premise it that through one knockout blow, you can destroy Iran. and that as long as Iran is destroyed, therefore they can no longer continue to provide support to Hamas and Hezbollah. Now, I think the extent of that support and for Hamas and Hezbollah has been overstated. Let's not forget a big financial backer of Hamas, government of Israel, through Mossad. They were doing it for years, sending them money in order to keep them viable. And you can bet that some of that money was used to build these tunnels that are undergirding the Gaza Strip. So this exaggerated notion that Iran can be easily defeated and taken out, and that there's a simmering anger among Iranian youth just waiting to rip the mullahs off the top, and they'll all rise up and have video games and be able to drink excessively, and promote a trans movement in Iran. I guess, I don't know, but it's not going to happen. The United States demonstrated in Iraq the limitations of our own power. We demonstrated in Afghanistan the limitations of our own power. And it's not a matter of, well, if only we would have what?
What? Yeah.
Yeah. What as you're trying to point out, what are the details? What specifically are you going to do to achieve that particular objective? If our objective is regime change, okay, we say that's our long-term objective in Iran, but one of the most foolish ways to do it is to continue to directly attack Iran, because that just builds support for the existing rulers. It doesn't diminish it. So,
yeah, because unless you're going to take an army of, I don't know, 500,000 or more on the ground into Tehran from somewhere, all you're going to do is blow up a bunch of stuff, and the war will continue on indefinitely, because they'll be able to continue off and on. That's one of the big problems. Now, I'm going to show you one last set of videos here, actually two of them. One is Nikki Haley came out and made some really brash arguments. I think it was on this morning on Fox News, and she's referring to something that Biden had said. I'm going to show you that pair, but to give the context of why this is so alarming to me and why we're even doing this show here, is that the United States already is running very low on interceptor missiles. Some of those that we used on the last Iranian shot from our missile destroyers, I think, out there. Some of these, I think that I can't remember the nomenclature, but we used to attack 12 of these Iranian missiles that were coming across here, which, as Matt Ho pointed out on our show, by showing the documentation, is about 1 year's worth of production, because we make so few of them in a single year. So we did that in an afternoon, and there could be a whole lot more coming. You had Jake Sullivan, who we've shown several times on here last month, admitting that we were so low on interceptor missiles, we had to take them from everywhere else in the world we promised any to give them to Ukraine. And we had Secretary of Defense Austin around the same time frame said, hey, we don't even have enough long-range missiles. And oh, by the way, neither does UK or France, to be able to let you have a campaign for Ukraine to fire long-range weapons into Russia. So we are exposing that we're already short of these things. At the same time, so many people are advocating that Israel launch a new front on its war, and a major one that would be an open-ended commitment that would require a lot of interceptor missiles and long-range missiles. Now, given that context, here first is President Biden talking about he's trying to have a little bit of restraint.
Would you support an attack on Iran's nuclear sites by Israel?
The answer is no. I think there's things that we'll be discussing with the Israelis what they're going to do, but all seven of us agree that they have a right to respond, but they should respond in proportion.
Sir, can I ask you, what is your advice to Israel as far as how they should respond to this right now?
I leave that to, we're giving them that advice.
Okay. When will you talk to Bibi?
Well, we've been talking to Bibi's people the whole time, and that's not necessarily to talk to Bibi. I'll probably be talking to him relatively soon, I guess.
The war in the Middle East is now.
Okay, so Biden is saying No, I don't want him to strike the nuclear facilities, not the least of which because that could cause nuclear fallout throughout the region, which could hit our troops, by the way, because we got a bunch of them out there. That's apparently a minor issue that no one wants to think about there. But then he's also saying, hey, look, we need to actually calm things down here. But that's not going over well for Nikki Haley, who responded to his comments like this.
First of all, let's take a look. You've got a U.S. president who got together with the G7 to decide what Israel should do. And in no world would I have ever expected that he would take the side of the Ayatollah, that he would take the side of the Ayatollah, telling Israel, don't do it, hold back, and calling for restraint. Why would you do that?
Why would you call for restraint, for crying out loud, when we can easily get into another war? And so she equated restrain on something that's militarily unattainable is equal to loving the Ayatollah. And I just, it scares me to think that this woman was close. Number one, that she was the United States ambassador to the United Nations, i.e. supposed to be the diplomatic chief to try to avoid wars, is actually the biggest cheerleader for it and was at least in the running to be president of the United States. That's crazy.
Well, and on top of it, she's never served in the military, number one. I doubt if she's ever been in a bar fight, number two. And you say, well, what's the relevance of a bar fight? At least if you've been in a bar fight, you understand that it's not like the movies. It's not like television. You can't just bash people in the head endlessly over a 20-minute period and be rested and refreshed. You find out that once you get into a physical fight, you can get exhausted quickly. What applies to people also applies to nations and to armies. Nikki Haley's one of those who on the first battle of Bull Run would have been in one of the carriages going out with a picnic basket to watch the quick end of the war, and then wound up at the end of the day fleeing for her life, trying to get back to the safety of Washington. They don't understand that as much as we've made Iran into an enemy, part of that is our own doing. When we've classified Iran as a terrorist organization because they attacked Marine barracks in Lebanon and their U.S. Embassy facility. But the reality is they weren't in that case, they weren't attacking a civilian airplane. The Marines wear a uniform, carry weapons, legitimate military target. We may not have liked how it happened, but the fact that there was lousy perimeter security, that's not the fault of Iran. That's the fault of the chain of command with the Marines at that time. Ditto for the embassy. Now, I'm not suggesting that it's okay to carry, because those are acts of war. Let's be clear about that. But we fail to distinguish between what Iran is doing from a standpoint of it's really challenging official U.S. government policy. And it has been for a long time, and with good reason, because the United States government interfered and overthrew the government of Iran at one point. So, I mean, this back and forth of meddling in each other's affairs, it's turning deadly now.
So let me ask you this. What is the risk to Israel and the United States if Israel does strike into Iran and it opens up a new open-ended warfare, given that we don't have enough ammunition to sustain Israel on all these 7 fronts and Ukraine on its 7 fronts? So really, you need to add in Ukraine to that too. Can we maintain these wars indefinitely at the same level and not have a problem?
No. And here, let me give you the worst case. So for us, the worst case is we back Israel. Israel hits both oil and nuclear sites, and Iran retaliates immediately by striking those sites in Israel, as well as going after the U.S. military base at Al Udeid Air Force Base in Qatar, going after the outposts that are in eastern Syria. And then all of a sudden, the United States is facing multiple threats to its personnel and assets throughout the region. Then any attempt by the United States to retaliate is going to be met by Russia and China. Russia and China have been conducting joint military exercises with Iran, and that's not just for kicks. They're sending a clear message that they have a formal relationship with Iran. And in fact, President Pezeshkian, the new Iranian leader, is going to Moscow, I believe, next week, meeting with Putin, and reportedly going to sign this new defensive pact. So it puts the United States in the position of we're going to be facing off against Russia and China, because part of their military exercises were designed to keep the Straits of Hormuz open in the Persian Gulf.
Well, now let me look at that for a second. Let's go down that part of it for the second. Now, I want you to continue where you were going to go about the way things look for us and for Israel. But if Israel ever does what so many are advocating, which is the Iranian regime, if Russia already has several agreements have already been signed, and they certainly count on them to continue on with their war with whether it's drones and other kinds of missiles, et cetera, that they're going to be okay with that, or that China, who gets 1.5 million barrels a day of oil from Iran, is also going to be okay with that. What actions could they take? Because I can't imagine that either would immediately go to war with the United States over it. But what else could they do to make life difficult for us and or Israel?
Well, I think Russia at least is already doing it, and that means supplying intelligence, targeting intelligence, as well as operational intelligence about what Israel's planning to do. Because remember, it is highly likely, is highly touted as Mossad is. The Russian intelligence service is quite good. You've got upwards of 2 million Russians that live in Israel. I guarantee you there's a Russian or the Israeli citizen there who also holds Russian citizenship, who may be working in a sensitive area, and that the intelligence about what Israel is going to do is being passed to Russia. So they can pass that on to Iran. The other thing the Russians are able to do, and the Chinese, to a lesser extent, provide personnel on the ground that can help man the air defense systems around critical infrastructure. So they can become a force multiplier in that regard. As well as by having that physical presence, sending a message both to the United States and to Israel that, hey, we've got our personnel there. So if you target them, if you target that site and kill our personnel, you're going to have a problem with us. And I think that also has added to the hesitancy in making an immediate response to the missile attacks from last Monday.
So really, every way you want to look at this, I mean, we are in trouble now, and if we keep going down all these paths without putting the brakes on, it could get a lot worse.
Well, yeah, and remember, Iran has already joined BRICS. They requested to become a part of BRICS. They got the thumbs up from the 5 BRICS nations. So it means they're in an economic relationship as well with Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa. And Saudi Arabia is coming into that arrangement. So here you got Saudi Arabia and Iran previously at odds, now moving in the same direction. You've got Iran reaching out and looking at reconciliation with Turkey, because both Iran and Turkey share some common concerns about the Kurdish populations. The Kurds are wanting independence from both. So, and within this entire array of the boiling of the Middle East there, the United States' influence is diminishing. It's not increasing. And especially with Israel. Israel's like a defiant 17-year-old kid who's just, made some inappropriate suggestions to his mother, and he's going to go ahead and do whatever the hell he wants. And then when he does it, all of a sudden it didn't turn out as he thought, and he got trouble. And that's where I think Israel's headed with this. I think the combination of their arrogance, their hubris, their overconfidence is going to lead them to make some very, very bad, both tactical and strategic decisions.
Well, and it looks like, Gary, I wonder if I could ask you to bring up a couple of those headlines I just saw you pop up there. One, Yoav Gallant was talking about that the strike would be out of nowhere, something like that. If you could throw that up there real quick, and then also follow that one up. And I wanted to ask you, Larry, what you thought about the prospect that Iran has prevented Yoav Gallant from coming to Washington here, which was supposed to have happened, I think, today for a meeting with Secretary of Defense. That was canceled, and he was withdrawn allegedly because they don't want to be lectured or something to that about what they're going to do. And then now here I see this one that you're throwing up. That's today, I guess, that Gallant said when Israel strikes back, it won't understand what happened to it, but it will be painful, I think was the term we saw in a minute ago. What do you make of the fact that Gallant was not allowed to come here, and what does it say about the potential timing of anything?
Yeah, so that was Netanyahu's decision to pull Gallant back, because I think he's worried that Gallant's going to come and has some sense talked into him by the folks under Lloyd Austin at the Pentagon. And he said, absolutely not, because Netanyahu and his immediate advisors had been in touch with Jake Sullivan and Blinken and Austin, and they knew what the United States was insisting on, and they said, no, we're not going to do that. So, these people who are arguing that Israel is America's, lapdog and does what we tell it to do, this latest incident is clearly shown it's the exact opposite. Israel, they listen when they want to, but they're going to do whatever they feel is in their own best interest. Even if it's not in their best interest, they're still going to do it.
Right. So is that what that tells you, that by Netanyahu preventing Gallant from coming here, does that signal to you that they have made decisions? And now with that second headline, apparently that's out today, that there's going to be a painful strike when they strike. How do you see that unfolding?
It strikes me a little bit like the jaw-jacking of two drunks in a bar. Hey, I'm going to punch you in the face. No, I'm going to punch you in the face. I'm going to figure. They go back and forth. If you're going to punch somebody, punch it. Don't telegraph it. I'm a big believer in the sucker punch. So I think, the fact that Israel's out there talking about it it's more of a public relations intimidation plan. Because, look, do you think the Iranians are sitting over there figuring out, what flavor of hummus do I want tonight? Israel may attack us. Who? No, they're aware that they're in the crosshairs of Israel. I'm sure they're getting intelligence passed to them by the Russians and probably the Chinese, because the Chinese may not put anybody in there on the ground, but I guarantee you they're going to share intelligence that they have about what Israel's up to, what their plans are. And I also believe that one of the other aspects of having Russian involvement, they're going to teach the Iranians about maskirovka, about how to do deception, how to create illusions of threats in certain areas that will force Israeli assets to be used up in a needless, useless attack, and at the same time be prepared to strike back and strike back quickly. So, it's a dangerous, dynamic situation, but I think every day that passes that we don't have a retaliation from Israel means that I think they're starting to finally reassess that there may be limits to what they can do.
Let's hope that's the case, because that certainly is what is desperately needed in this entire just flaming chaotic situation here. We'll certainly wait to see how it unfolds. We'll definitely be giving everybody the information as it breaks and doesn't here on Daniel Davis Deep Dive, as you do on sonar21.com. People can keep going there to find out all the things you have to say, and all the observations you make also on a daily basis, as they can find out what's happening there. So thank you very much for coming on the show today. Listen, really appreciate it, especially given that you're about to fight your own battle. Be sure to put that Kevlar back on, because you may need it.
I got to get that back on here.
That's right. If that hurricane pops in there, you don't want to be unprepared. And so best of luck to you out there, and we hope everything turns out fine.
All right, brother. Hey, thanks. It's always a privilege and an honor. Appreciate it.
And likewise for us too. Thank you very much. It's a privilege and honor to have you guys here with us, because if it wasn't for you, there would be no Daniel Davis Deep Dive. Thank you very much. And by the way, tomorrow we've got another outstanding guest. I love Alexander Mercurius from the Duran. He'll be on the show at 3:30 p.m. tomorrow. Do not miss that one. And we will see you on the Daniel Davis Deep Dive.